I think it's a really, really difficult job for anyone. And I think the next person, all they've got to do is not get Palace relegated. That is the only job that the next person really has to do.
But that is the job. That is the job.
From there, where do you go?
But that is the job. Of course it's the job.
You just stay 12th forever.
Yes, you do. But Arsenal, they are hosting Crystal Palace on Sunday. And Palace are now managerless. They've sacked Patrick Vieira, of course. And we thank Crystal Palace for doing that before we recorded the podcast. Because often that's not the case, Andy.
Praise be to the footballing gods and to Steve Parish for pulling the trigger in good time for us to be able to cover it.
Poor old Paddy, though. I mean, he was going to get his emotional return to Arsenal, and they've brutally, heartlessly dumped him.
Yeah.
Have you seen the results?
On St Patrick's Day as well.
Couldn't it have waited till after the international break? Is this going to make a massive difference to the result on Sunday?
Is this the only time in history, as Marcus rightly points out, that a manager has been fired in football on the official day of his name?
Maybe.
Surely this never happened before.
I bet it has, because in parts of continental Europe, names days are a big thing.
Yeah. Okay.
So every day's is 2 or 3, maybe more.
David Moyes sacked on St David's Day.
Ooh,
you know,
there's still time.
I can't think of a manager at the moment called Andrew something. No. St Andrew's Day, but if I could, I would.
Yeah, true enough. We could sack Russell.
George Burley or St George. Yeah, we'll do it. We'll do it when it comes up. Love that.
But yeah, so he's gone, and of course this is 12 games without a win. I mean, they lost to Brighton midweek. They did manage to get a shot on target though after 3 games without one. Again, that does suggest why he was sacked, of course. As Steve Parish said, it was with enormous regret, and ultimately results have left us in that precarious position, which is why he's been sacked, of course. Clearly, it's something that they didn't want to do, but their hands are tied, Andy. We've been talking about Palace these last couple of weeks about how they are the side who are slipping down.
Yes.
I mean, they're not even getting shots on target, for crying out loud, let alone scoring goals and winning games. I actually, if you look at this is a very understandable sack.
Yeah, I think it absolutely is. Having said that, I just wonder, who do Palace get who makes it better? I guess that's not really the question for now. The question is, let's just get ourselves away from the bottom, because place-wise they're fine, points-wise they're not, and it's just about staying in the Premier League for the moment. I think you get a lot more of these sackings in the modern game because it is so financially ruinous if you get relegated from the Premier League. But Palace have been in this weird twilight zone for a long time, and Vieira gave a sort of glimmer of hope that they could get themselves out. But still,
do you reckon that's what
Palace,
he said?
Palace is still...
Last season we were good.
Yeah, exactly. Palace are still in that position where...
I played midfield for Arsenal.
Then they're not going to qualify for Europe.
Yeah.
They're highly unlikely to go down in most situations.
Palace.
So yeah, you look at where they are. Where can you go from where they are? I don't like building something.
Yeah, but I don't think this
is extremely complicated.
You're taking something else. This is about
no. I've already explained. I understand in this situation because the only thing that matters is that they stay up.
Yeah.
But I'm saying globally, in terms of what we expect a Crystal Palace manager to do, what can you expect a Crystal Palace manager to do? With him, it was evolve the style, but it wasn't qualify for Europe. It wasn't get away from the bottom, because they were never in serious danger of relegation under Hodgson in the first place. So, what can you hope to get out of
the
it,
issue?
really?
But there's no time. There's a time and a place for those kind of philosophical discussions for you and your broadsheet mates to have.
Yeah, my broadsheet
over
mates.
your
When did
coffee.
you last read a paper? 1995. Put your hand in your pocket. Come on, support the industry.
No, joking aside, I think you've got to look at the fact that they're in absolute freefall. They don't score goals.
Yeah, totally.
And they had an opportunity. If you look at, they've only won 1 Premier League game, so I think it's around the beginning of November. They had the opportunity with the start they had, which wasn't too bad, to be on the other side of the schism that's now emerged in the Premier League, which is basically 12th place downwards has a danger of being relegated. 11th place upwards doesn't.
Yeah.
Palace could have been on the other side of that, and they're not. So when you look at it in the round, and as Marcus said at the start of all this, when we first started talking about this situation, they're not even really famously getting shots on target.
Think of the attacking talent they've got.
And they've got, it was exactly the point I was going to make. They've got a lot of good, exciting attacking players. What I would say is this: the job that Vieira did post Hodgson to reinvent that team and get them to the position he got them in. They finished 12th last
I think
season
they
as
were
well.
finished 12th.
Yeah, different football, exciting football. They're a good, solid team.
Would he argue that they were on course again for that finish?
Yeah, well, the thing is, and then Andy's right on one level because he's right to point out the points rather than the position. They've only dropped a couple of positions in the table, but they find themselves 3 points off relegation. So you understand why they've got to make a move at some point.
I'll be honest with you.
I do.
I thought if they, the way they were going, I thought they were going to go down. I honestly thought that was my
sure.
and clearly
the big chat is this. It tells you something when the biggest reaction to this situation that we've heard this morning from people is, oh, isn't it a shame it doesn't get to go back to Arsenal?
Yeah,
it's not about him, because he played for Arsenal once.
Yeah.
He's one of their best ever players.
At least he can have a proper St Patrick's Day tonight, though.
Yeah, it's true. Exactly right.
You know, it swings and roundabouts.
But I would say the two things are connected. The global where do Palace go and the situation they find themselves in at the moment. Because how do you build on last season? There's nowhere really to go. I think it's a really, really difficult job for anyone. And I think the next person, all they've got to do is not get Palace relegated. That is the only job that the next person really has to do.
But that is the job. That is the job.
From there, where do you go?
That is the job. Of course it's the job.
You just stay 12th forever.
Yes, you do. If you can.
That's really, really hard.
No, but it isn't.
To keep a fan base energised, to keep players interested. It's super difficult.
Come on. No,
it's super difficult.
It is, Andy, but you're missing the... Look, Palace
I'm not missing the point. I just said I know what the point is for now.
Palace are...
I think Andy's been disgraceful there.
Palace are, in Premier League terms, one of the smaller London clubs, right?
Yeah.
They would need perhaps a new stadium because it's a bit of a creak. Well, not creaking, but it's a small...
The stadium needs the facelift that it's been planned for ages, but that it hasn't had yet.
Right enough. Yes. Okay. So, there they are.
They need a swimming pool.
They need every... Let's get the one at Fulham. Let's get the prototype done and see what everybody follows with. But Palace are there. And if Palace could say to themselves, we are probably the 12th, 13th best side in England, I think that would be an enormous achievement.
That's fine to say if you're not a Palace fan.
Let me chime in here because I think there's a wider context, and that is this is indicative of what the football has become
100%
in this country.
Couldn't agree more.
So I'm not disagreeing with either of you necessarily, but what I'm saying is this path you guys are discussing here about this existential idea of what clubs actually are and where they get to and what's possible for them is something that's been trodden before with clubs a similar size to Crystal Palace. So Stoke had that issue with Pulis.
Swansea.
They ended up pulling the trigger with Pulis because they wanted to change their style.
Charlton.
But Burnley's another one.
Yeah.
Burnley did
Charlton was slightly different. They were on the side.
I think Charlton and Swansea are slightly different. I think Stoke and Burnley definitely are one.
Yeah.
And then Palace are finding themselves in this position. But unfortunately, I think Marcus is right. What I mean by that is
let's leave it there.
What I mean by that is let's have a break. No, what I mean by that is that the way football is now, you're Steve Parish, who's ultimately making these decisions, or at least being the spokesman for these decisions and having an input into it. If you say to him, you can be 12th in the Premier League for the foreseeable future every single season, he's obviously going to say thank you very much indeed. I've had a lovely day, thanks, Noel.
Yeah, exactly. And the sad thing is that unless they do get a huge takeover, you know, that is probably the ceiling. However, there are the odd little glimmer of hope, and you know, they won't thank me for saying this, but look at Brighton. You know, I know that will disgust a lot.
Unfortunately for Crystal Palace, their glimmer of hope might turn out to be Rafa Benitez holding a torch.
Oh, now you're talking. I don't know, but I've just suggested that Palace might find inspiration from Brighton. Let's stop the Palace chat there for crying out loud, because if Palace fans aren't,
you're just Jules' puppet.
I think I am.
Have you not started the campaign to get Roy back for 3 months?
No, Roy enjoys retirement.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, enjoys retirement. I just liked it. I saw him the other day on the.
Well, if you're not promoting it, it's not happening, is it?
Well, because I saw him on the pitch at Fulham the other week when it was, they do this thing Forever Fulham and certain people turn up, and I thought that's lovely, and he'll do his tour, as I said.
Swoop down from the roof,
picking a field mouse out from between his teeth.
So he'll go around his old clubs, and as I said at the time, he'll have a little walk on the pitch at Anfield, no doubt.
He's the only man that can look at all the clubs he's managed just by turning his head.
Surely Sheffield Wednesday.
Yeah, big time. I think we made that observation before.
I'm now managing the Owls.
Yeah. Who's the next Crystal Palace manager going to be? Wouldn't it be funny if Roy Hodgson managed Sheffield Wednesday? That's the insight, is it? Listen, what is actually interesting as an addendum to all this, when we talk about the next manager at Crystal Palace, it's fascinating to me now how Steven Gerrard and Frank Lampard are forever kind of stuck together.
Yep.
I saw them on Betfair with exactly the same odds to be the next Crystal Palace manager.
As I said, until they are co-managers,
Yeah.
1 week one manages, one has steps back, until we have that situation. Mikel Arteta.
The way you should do that is before the game, Lampard and Gerrard are on the pitch, and who would the fans like to manage their team for this game? And then there's a big poll, and it's put on the big screen, and the loser, Roy Hodgson, swoops down and picks him and flies off with him.